Hello everyone. Welcome back to the IDRiM podcast. In this today's episodes, we will have Professor Hamilton Bean from the University of Colorado, Denver. That we will talk about the IDRiM journals and how it states right now, and basically to promote the journal as part of our products in iDreams. And as the earlier episodes, if you know that we already talked about one of the publications that been published in this journal, but today's we delve more into the journal and how all of you can also publish in this journal. So now for Professor Hamilton, can you explain more what about this journal and how it states right now and what can we do to publish in here?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be part of the IDRiM Society podcast today. This is a really great treat. I really admire what you're doing in featuring the researchers working in this area, the members of the IDRiM Society, and of course, publications in the journal. Let me clarify for the listening audience that I'll be sharing some slides here. And if you're interested in seeing the content of the slides, I urge you to go take a look at the video recording of this podcast. But I'll try to break this down in a way where if you're just listening, you can follow along as well. These slides today come from the IDRiM Journal and Publications Committee. And I want to thank the journal's editorial assistant, Kumiko Harada, and also our editor-in-chief of the journal, Dr. Ana Maria Cruz, for these slides that I'll be presenting today. So the first thing to acknowledge are the number of editors and folks working at the journal who make it possible. Our editor-in-chief is as I said, Dr. Ana Maria Cruz, and also Stefan Horschreiner Stigler. We have about 8 editors drawn from the IDRiM Society membership. And during the year, we have a slate of guest editors. These guest editors are usually affiliated with the IDRiM Society's annual conference and the location in which it's held. So our current guest editors are all drawn from the recent conference that was held in Cartagena, Colombia. And then, of course, our wonderful editorial assistant is Kumiko Harada, and I just cannot say enough, cannot sing the praises of Kumiko enough. She really does a wonderful job in managing the editorial process for the journal and helping you all get your articles submitted, reviewed, and published. Let me give you some recent titles of articles that have been published in the journal so that you can get a sense of the scope of the kinds of research that the journal publishes. These are just 5 titles. Let me read them for the audience. The first is Flooding Probability and Temporal Risk Assessment for LNG. LNG stands for Liquefied Natural Gas. Vaporizer Unit established in West Coast, Malaysia. Next one is Implementation of Geodesign Framework for Development of Flood Resilient Hilltown, a Case Study. The next one is Prioritization of Susceptibility Zones for Multi-Hazard in Jammu Division of the Northwest Himalayas, India for Disaster Risk Reduction. Next is Civil Society Community Disaster and State Responses, a critical study of, I think it's pronounced, oh, shoot. I forgot how it's pronounced. For the cyclone in 2017, floods in 2018 and 19 in Kerala, India, and why are community-based early warning systems inadequate? A case study of the Lechungo River Basin in Mozambique. So you can see that these articles really reflect a diverse array of topics in disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management, focused on different areas of the world, different hazards, and different situations. So we're really proud of the diversity of the articles that we publish in IDRiM Journal, and that diversity is expanding. It's important to note that the IDRiM Journal is indexed in Scopus. Scopus is one of the several indexing organizations for academic journals. I first became affiliated with IDRiM Society in 2019. and led the charge in collaboration with Dr. Anna Maria Cruz, to get the IDRiM Journal indexed in Scopus as a way to encourage further submissions and publication. We earned Scopus indexing in 2021. In that year, we published 2 issues of the journal. Each issue had 7 articles, so a total of 14. In 2024, just 3 years later, the first issue of the journal that year had 10 articles, and the second issue had 15. So you can see we have doubled in the 3 years since Scopus indexing the number of publications that the journal is offering each year. This is good news for the journal. Our next effort will be to try to have the journal indexed in another indexing organization called ISI Web of Science, which is it's considered a prestigious index. The minimum number of publications per year that ISI Web of Science requires to index an academic journal is 20. So if we can consistently show 20 articles published a year, we may have a chance. Of course, we'd like to show a little bit more, not just meet the minimum, and we're on our way to doing that. But you can see we've made really rapid progress in increasing the number of articles that the journal publishes each year. Here are some analytics for the journal. You can see that we've had 37 new submissions to date. There are currently 41 manuscripts in progress, most of those occurring in the new year. You can see that our average days to decision declined pretty steeply in 2024, but this was due to some personnel changes at the journal. We hired Kumiko Harada to help us with our editorial tasks, and the onboarding and training took some time, but now we are going full steam ahead and expect that the average days to decision will decline substantially in 2025. The acceptance rate for the journal's articles is declining steadily, and it'll probably further decline, which is actually good news because it means that the rigor of the studies that we publish is increasing, because we can be choosier about which manuscripts to publish. You can see from 2022 to 2024, we doubled the number of submissions to the journal. In 2022, we had 44 submissions. In 2024, we had 94 submissions. So our days to either a reject or an acceptance, they've increased. But again, this is largely due to the personnel changes at the journal last year, and we expect to see a steady improvement and a reduction in the days to a decision, whether that's a reject or accept, in the coming months. So some other analytics that might interest the audience for this podcast. We have readers from all over the world. The countries that are most represented in coming to the website for the IDRiM Journal, and I should note for listeners, all of the IDRiM Journal articles are published without need. They're not paywalled. They are open access. They are freely available to read and download, which is a benefit of the IDRiM Society's management of the journal, and a kind of service, a complimentary service that is provided to people working in this area. And we're really proud of that we're able to offer these articles without a fee. So the countries that most come to the IDRiM Journal website are Japan, India, Indonesia, Colombia, probably as a result of having the IDRiM conference hosted in Colombia last year, the Philippines, United States, and then on and on. But those were the top that you can find coming to our journal. And you can see some of those countries reflected in the kinds of the articles that are being published in the journal recently, in that they focus on areas in those countries. We are given a Scopus site score every year, and we are fortunate to see that our site score has more than doubled from 2022 to 2024. In 2022, our site score was 0.4, and in 2024, was 0.9, and we expect it to increase further. This is a measure of the number of citations that a manuscript, an article receives in a journal, divided by the number of articles that have been published in your journal. So in 2024, we had 58 citations of articles in that year divided by the 62 articles published in the journal, which resulted in a cite score of 0.9. Again, we're looking to have that number increase in the years to come. We've implemented a few new facets of the journal, shall we say. Last year, we offered our inaugural Article of the Year award. It went to Doctors Okada, Goebel, Seo, and Han for their article, Implementation Gaps Are Persistent Phenomena in Disaster Risk Management, a perspective developed after discussions at IDRiM 2022. And we selected the nomination committee selected this article because, as we may talk about later in this podcast, implementation science is an emerging focus of the journal, something that the editors and the community, the IDRiM Society, want to focus on, and we can talk more about that. And we felt that this article was representative of that changing discussion and the importance of it. Also, last year, we offered our inaugural Landmark Article Award, and this is for an article published in the journal that has earned more than 100 citations across Google Scholar. And we offered the award to Dr. Cardona and Dr. Carreno for their article published in 2011 in the IDRiM Journal. Its title was Updating the Indicators of Disaster Risk and Risk Management for the Americas. The nomination committee felt this was an appropriate selection this year, or last year, I should say, because of the location of the IDRiM Society's annual conference in Cartagena, Colombia. We've done a few things to improve the quality of the journal, its review process, the editorial process. We developed and implemented an editorial manual in July of 2024, and this is guiding the work of our editors and editorial assistant. We also established a promotion plan back in 2022, at the end of 2022. Most of that was put on pause due to the staff changes at the journal that I mentioned, but now that the staff is firmly in place and has gained more experience, we're going to be returning to efforts around this promotion plan. Some of the things that we have done already that I'd just like to highlight for the audience are we have implemented our 2 new awards. This coming year at the IDRiM conference, we plan to offer a 3rd award, which we will share more information about with the IDRiM Society later, but we're considering a new investigator award for a junior scholar who's making a big impact in the field. We have ensured that our articles that are being published in the IDRiM Journal are mentioned every time that the IDRiM News Bulletin is issued, so that we're highlighting the work that's going on in the journal. And I'd like to invite the IDRiM Society podcast to sometimes make a note of new articles published in the journal if you would be willing to highlight those for us. So we have a plan to publish a special issue on implementation science. This is being led by Dr. Okada and Dr. Goebel, and we're excited about that special issue that is in process now. We have been conducting publication workshops and special sessions at the IDRiM conference to help junior scholars publish in the journal, and we were successful in creating that editorial manual that I mentioned earlier. So those are just a few things that we've done, and we have plenty of more promotion activities on the horizon. I do want to take this opportunity to remind listeners that our call for papers, the special conference issue, the deadline has been extended for a final time to March 14th, 2025. So that's 10 days from the day of the recording of this podcast. So not much time if you haven't considered it, but if you have work that you presented at the IDRiM conference in Cartagena in Colombia, and you would like publication consideration in IDRiM Journal, this is a fantastic opportunity to publish a full article, a technical note, which is is a kind of like a work in progress or a thematic summary, which is a way to engage in conversation around a particular topic in disaster risk reduction and disaster risk management that you want to bring to the community. So that call for papers is on the journal website, and we hope that people will respond to it. And of course, we have a permanent open call for papers and special issues related to the topics of the journal, and we encourage listeners to go check that out at the website.
Thank you, Professor Hamilton.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very enlightening that how the journals has been going on and on. Like as you mentioned, that several awards now, and there will be more award coming. That I think one of the feature that maybe most interested for our audience is like it's keeping the journals free. There is no paywall at all, and like everyone can access it without any publication fee or maybe viewing fee. How, do you have any info for that? How the IDRiM Society can keep the journal free, and do you have any insight for how long? Because like maybe like maybe this is until this year, or they will be keeping free until whatever long it is.
Well, I cannot be, I thank you for the question. I can't be certain as to the future of the journal, but as I said, it is a point of pride among the journal staff, the editor-in-chief and the editors, that the journal is free for readers and also free of publication fees. This is our goal, to maintain the structure, the structure of the journal as it is. The journal is supported by the membership fees for the IDRiM Society. And to the extent that we can continue to make this a free and widely available resource to members of the society and to members of the disaster risk management community and to the wider public, that is our intention. If there is an effort to change that on the horizon, I am unaware of it. But I am just one member of the editorial team at IDRiM Journal. But it is, like I said, our hope to maintain things as they are, as a benefit to all of us.
Yeah, and also I'd like to also point out something that I know that a lot of young researchers might not be aware, because I know that impact factor is always a thing that I know in the UK it's get drilled into you, the impact factor. You've got to publish high impact factor. But I like to also draw to our listeners' attention as well about the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, which is basically where institutions who sign up say that we don't recognize impact factor. It's about the quality of the research itself. So, and the latest I just checked, 26,000 institutions have now signed up. So if you hear about impact factor, yes, it's got some importance, but it's not the most important thing. It's about the quality of the research rather than just getting into the highest impact factor journal.
Oh, and I appreciate that. Yes, so I think viewers or listeners might notice that the impact factor of the journal is low in comparison to others in the field. This is in part due to the lack of indexing that had occurred for the journal in the past. Again, we are now Scopus indexed. The keywords associated with that indexing appear to have been miscategorized at some point, not due to anything that we did at the journal, but perhaps something that happened on Scopus's end, where the journal was categorized in fields that didn't seem quite appropriate. So I know that we at the journal are striving to get that corrected so that the impact factor would be also improved and corrected for the categories in which we publish. So we are working to improve, as I said, our site score, our impact factor. These things take time, but to the extent that we publish high quality manuscripts, those get cited in other outlets, and that we continue to achieve new levels of indexings, for example, in ISI Web of Science, we will see those impact factors rise across these platforms. I do want to say, though, especially to the young researchers, and I can get to this a little bit later if you'd like to elaborate on it, but it is very important for PhD students or for MA students, master's students who are considering a PhD program. The IDRiM Journal has opportunities to publish in ways that do make a difference. Your work will be read by a community of scholars and practitioners and considered. And so to the extent that you want to demonstrate that you are able to enter this conversation, this scholarly conversation, and make a contribution, the IDRiM Journal is an excellent first step in your career for doing that. It is accessible to you, and you will be encouraged and supported by our editorial team, by the reviewers who want to publish research from junior scholars, from students who are trying to make a difference. So it is a great first step and a great first outlet for scholars looking to publish their work.
Thank you for the explanations on how the journal performance actually are not really affected by several metrics, but looking forward to the quality of the research actually published in the journal. I would like to delve into actually when I check on the slides that you provided, the IDRiM Journal has quite high rejection rate, because like you only accept up to 2024 only 31%. Can you share with us why this happens? Like, what is actually most articles rejected, whether they are not in line with the purpose of the journal, or maybe there are some articles that not good enough to be published in the journal?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do, and I've tried to pull up my slides here around suggestions for authors, because your question gets to these issues. There are a number of reasons that an article or manuscript might be rejected from IDRiM Journal. Number one, as you allude to, it just may not be a good fit. The topic of the manuscript may be too far outside the scope of disaster risk management or implementation science. So making sure that your contribution, in fact, is in line with the scope and mission of the journal, with the mission of IDRiM Society as the owner and convener of the journal, these would be important. Another issue that might result in a rejection is that the manuscript doesn't make a clear contribution to advancing knowledge of disaster risk management or implementation science. So it may be, in fact, a well-written manuscript, but the scientific contribution, the contribution in knowledge, is unclear. And so we as journal editors are striving to publish research that makes a clear and substantive contribution to the academic discourse or the professional practice of disaster risk management. How do you make sure that your work does this? Well, as I outline on the slide for viewers of this discussion, but let me elaborate for people who are just listening, some of the areas that are important to address is to first make sure that your contribution is cumulative. And by cumulative, we mean that you, as an author and as a scholar, have situated your contribution in the existing literature in a way that advances our understanding of the topic at hand. So being cumulative, the metaphor here is like building a wall of bricks. You are accountable to all the bricks that have been laid before, and you are adding your brick as part of that wall, constructing that edifice of knowledge, shall we say. So manuscripts that fail to be cumulative, that recreate studies from the past, that don't acknowledge the work that has gone on in that area of research prior, those manuscripts may have a tougher time earning an acceptance from IDRiM Journal. You also need to make sure that your contribution is significant. And you can only do this if you understand the questions that have been asked about your topic in the past, the answers that have been produced, and how your particular contribution pushes knowledge, academic knowledge, or professional practice forward. So we're looking for articles that make a significant contribution. And that the final thing to say here is that we're looking for manuscripts that enter into and advance the scholarly conversation that is occurring in the field. So it really requires authors to be up to date on those conversations. What do the latest research papers in the area identify are the key issues, the key drivers, the key findings, and making sure that your work is reflective of that and pushing the social science forward. So these are areas that are important, and to the extent that manuscripts fail to account for them, it could lead to rejection. There is one final area that I think I should mention, though. Please, authors, if you're considering submitting your paper to IDRiM Journal, we accept manuscripts in English, and we really encourage you to proofread and carefully edit the manuscript for the English language that is included, even if it's been translated with use of generative AI tools or other tools to help streamline that English language usage. Please ensure that spelling, punctuation, and grammar are as tight as possible. That's not necessarily an outright cause for rejection. In most cases, we will work with authors to try to ensure that the English language components of the manuscript are suitable for publication, but it does help when it comes to sending the manuscript out for review to make sure that it is abundantly readable in English. So those are the issues I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'm just looking through, your slides. Is there any more advice you can give to young researchers who are on the first steps of publications, and any tips you can give?
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. I'm going to back up my slides and talk about my personal experience a little bit as a way to answer your question. So I had some general remarks here that I wanted to share. When I was a graduate student a long time ago, it was similar to how it is now. Academic publication. I wanted to become an assistant professor. My field of study is organizational communication. So not in the mainstream of disaster risk management research, but adjacent to it. I study public warning systems. But I knew that I needed to publish as a graduate student so that I would have a better chance of earning an interview at an academic institution and eventually being hired. My first publication was in the Journal of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. This was a new journal at the time, and similar in some ways to the IDRiM Journal. It was open access, no publication fee, freely available to readers. It was a smaller journal, yet to establish a high impact factor or a strong record of indexing, but it was accessible to me as a graduate student. The quality of the manuscripts published in the journal was quite high, and the editorial standards and processes were very professional. So that was my first publication back in 2007. I also had another publication at that time in a different field, but those were my first efforts. I should warn students that if you are worried about being rejected, if you're worried about your manuscript being rejected from a publication, you need to get over it. That's part of the game of being a scholar. You will undoubtedly have manuscripts rejected from publications. Even the best scholars that I've worked with, world-renowned scholars, will occasionally have their manuscripts rejected as well. So likewise, as a graduate student, I had manuscripts rejected from top outlets that I had submitted to, but I want to encourage young researchers to be persistent. Just because one outlet rejects your manuscript doesn't necessarily mean it's fatally flawed. It means you should listen to the recommendations of the reviewers and the editor, make the changes that you can, and try to submit it somewhere else. So I had one of my manuscripts rejected 3 times before it was eventually published in a very high quality journal in my field when I was a graduate student, and I really learned the value of persistence. So I'd like to encourage young scholars to be persistent as well. I'm skipping ahead here. So when I was a graduate student earning my PhD, I was a new father. I had a lot of responsibilities, but one of my mentors, Dr. Angela Trethway, she sat me down one day and she said, Hamilton, I know you really want to be an assistant professor. You want to be a scholar. When I look at your resume, you need publications. It matters. It matters to review committees and hiring committees. So I set out to try to publish as much as I could as a PhD student. And as I said, I had some good luck, but I also worked pretty hard. So I want to encourage young researchers to do the same. Work hard, send your manuscripts out for review. You'll get rejections. It's okay. It's part of the process, but keep trying, keep improving, and you will eventually find success. So some advice for young researchers: review papers for academic conferences. That is an opportunity open to you even before you've earned your PhD in many cases. Try to co-publish research with your advisor or other mentors in your field. Become well-trained under those advisors and mentors. Learn how to write a manuscript that gets accepted for publication. Try to pay attention to the process of writing for publication. Also, if you can, try to solo author some work as well, because it's important for hiring committees to see that you can make a contribution on your own in addition to a contribution with your advisor or other faculty members. So if you're able to, in your subfield, try to solo author a work as a graduate student or soon thereafter. Make sure you carefully read the articles and the journals that you're targeting for your submission, because you want to mimic the style of that journal in your own submission. So sometimes we have articles submitted, manuscripts submitted to IDRiM Journal that come in a very odd style compared to what we publish in the journal. And you can tell that the author really hasn't done anything to try to conform to the style or the norms of the IDRiM Journal in the submission, and it detracts from analysis of the content of the manuscript. Make sure you cite the authors who publish in that journal that you're submitting to, perhaps even some of the editorial board members, as a way to also reassure readers of your manuscript that you are aware of the academic conversations or professional conversations that are taking place in that journal. So by citing those authors, those editorial board members, it reinforces that you know how to do that. And then follow the advice of a good book, like one of my favorites is called Craft of Research. It is by Wayne Booth et al. I don't know which edition it finally is in these days, but it's been a landmark volume for a very long time. And it has served me well in publishing research for the nearly 2 decades I've been working in the field. So a book like The Craft of Research or something similar, make sure you find a book like that and follow its advice as you're preparing your manuscript. So those are the things that I would recommend to young researchers, or to researchers of any age, frankly, that are seeking to publish.
Thank you for the sharing your stories about the rejections and how to publish. Well, I would like to cite a bit from the tips and rejections and something like that. But I would like to delve, like you mentioned, that we should take the current trends or issues in the research and like try to align our works into that. And many of these days, like there are many people actually also using you also mentioned it earlier, the generative AI. Maybe when in their work, or maybe when they drafting their manuscript, is there any effort from the IDRiM editors, especially to actually distinguish the people who use the generative AI to write their manuscript entirely or maybe partially, and someone who write it by themselves? Is there any policy in place in order to I don't know whether to select it or to share it, or just like maybe okay, the authors can use that, but into some extent like that?
Now, this is a great question and something that the IDRiM Journal is wrestling with right now. As you well know, journals are now coming out with different kinds of AI, generative AI use disclosures. different kinds of processes for documenting the use of those tools. And it is a fast-moving and fast-changing environment. The IDRiM Journal has, to this point, been sitting back and looking at how other peer journals in the field are handling these issues and seeking the best way forward. This is on the agenda for the IDRiM Journal Committee to wrestle with, to see what policy and practice we want to adopt for the journal going forward in the use of generative AI. Right now, my own personal, it's not the official view of the journal, but I would encourage researchers that are submitting work to the journal to be open and transparent with the use of generative AI tools in a way that upholds ethical norms in the field, to say, I use generative AI to help construct these portions of the manuscript or to help with editing. Just be clear and transparent with us as journal editors so that when we send your manuscript out for review, we can be sure, somewhat confident of which portions were generated by the authors or which had generative AI assistance. But there will be a more formal policy coming from the journal sometime soon.
Harris, actually, whilst we're talking about rejections, because I know that a lot of young people go through this stage, do you have any rejections you might want to share? Because I'm sure that all three of us have stories.
Well, this is the weird thing to me. I've been publishing for several times now, and I got the first rejection back on the 5 years ago. But after that first rejections, I didn't get any rejection at all. So I've been quite lucky in that case. So actually, after my first attempt was rejected, then maybe as Professor Hamilton, that okay, the 3 times rejection is uncommon. After that first rejection, actually I didn't try to publish again, and I tried to publish again 2 years later. After I try to read more and like to align with the journal that I would like to publish in, and like after that I didn't get any rejections. Yeah, I've been quite lucky, so I'm not sure if I will get another rejection in the future, but hopefully it will not be like that. How about you, Mark?
Yes, I got my first one last year, and it was more than a technical point. So basically, the way I was doing it was, what I like to do sometimes is to give a background of what is happening, because it was to what I call a non-specific one, because I work on education, so I was trying to use a background of what has been happening. So I was using news articles to say these are examples of these events that have been happening in the last 12 months. And the reviewer just looked at the first page, said don't like use of news articles, and complete rejection because of it. So there are some bad stories, and didn't even get to the second page onwards. So just to echo what Hamilton said, just because it's been rejected once doesn't mean that it's not a bad paper. Sometimes it's about style.
But there are some colleagues in here in Kyoto University that also like have been rejected so many times, and it's difficult, and especially as you mentioned earlier, maybe we translate it with in our languages, in like Japanese or Chinese, and like it's difficult to get past first process. And in other words, like people in disaster risk management usually working as interdisciplinary in subjects. We take several different disciplines and try to blend it into our research. Since many journals actually focusing on very single things that in their field, do you have any further maybe suggestion or maybe tips on how we can craft, or we can shift the focus of the readers of our interdisciplinary publications? Because like sometimes we would like, oh, our background is in this particular field, and like we would like to but our work is maybe have some addition from multiple different fields, and like therefore the readers perhaps from all those fields. What do you think
Yes.
about this?
Yeah, this is a great question, but I think you, in a sense, answered it, which is to say, you as an author need to make that shift somewhere in the manuscript, ideally both at the beginning and at the end in the findings, conclusions, and implications. And what I mean by this is, of course, the IDRiM Journal is publishing very specialized research in different areas. But one of the things that I think many of the manuscripts that get published have in common is that they're able to translate those specific concerns to a broader audience of disaster risk management practitioners and scholars in a way that can be helpful across different topics or technical subfields. So you need to be familiar enough with the broader field to take your specific findings and position them for others who aren't necessarily in the same specialization. If you're seeking to publish in a journal like IDRiM Journal, which has a broad readership across the field, but you're only speaking to a very narrow subsection of readers, scholars, and practitioners, that's ill-advised, in my opinion. You want to, of course, make your contribution for that particular subfield, but also do so in a way where the findings, conclusions, and implications of your study have relevance for that broader audience. How to do that, it's difficult to say in general terms, but look at some of the manuscripts published in the journal recently and how they've made that move to the broader implications, and I think you'll get some ideas.
Now, I think like we will arrive in the end of almost the end of the podcast. As you mentioned, but I would like to highlight some things that, as you mentioned, there will be workshops of the IDRiM Journal for the publications in the previous IDRiM conferences. Will there any workshop for in the similar manner in this year conferences and maybe in the future conferences of IDRiM?
Absolutely. So the call for papers and sessions for the conference that will be held in 2025 in Samos in Greece. Certainly, the IDRiM Journal Committee will be deliberating on what kind of workshop to offer and when. And my strong suspicion is that that workshop will be programmed as part of the conference. I will be co-organizing and hosting the IDRiM Society Conference in 2026 in Denver, Colorado, which has been announced. And of course, I would love to lead a workshop or session for scholars on publishing an IDRiM Journal at that time. So for the next 2 years, yes, there'll be opportunities to do that. Of course, if the IDRiM Society and the IDRiM Journal leadership is interested, we can offer online workshops as well as part of programming for IDRiM Society. In fact, I think we did offer such a session a few years ago that I participated in. It was more of an overview rather than a hands-on workshop, but it was meant to share information, especially for young scholars, on opportunities to publish with IDRiM Journal. While I do have the opportunity to mention it, I'd like to say that a number of us who have been serving the journal for the last few years, we are eager to reinvigorate the staff, the editorial staff, with new voices and new practitioners and scholars. And so to folks listening to this podcast, if you have experience with publishing, editing, and you're eager to serve IDRiM Society as a member of the journal, there are openings to do that, and we would look forward to you stepping forward and helping us, especially with the number of submissions that we have received recently in recent years. All of the editors are extremely busy, dutifully managing the reviews and the submission processes for the manuscripts are in the queue. And we would love additional help from the membership in expanding the staff, the team that's working on the journal, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you. And so as you listen, maybe that there are many member of the society. If you have any interest to taking your part in the IDRiM Journal, please contact Professor Hamilton or maybe Ana Maria Cruz and the other editors, right? So, Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Professor Hamilton, to come to our podcast. Hopefully, the IDRiM Journal can keep publishing more interesting and advanced papers in the journal, and hopefully, the journal can be free for how long it is in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was wonderful to talk to you, and good luck with the podcast. And I'll be listening to all the shows regularly. I'm a fan, so thank you very much for your hard work.